been called Pokémon with guns, a scam, a blatant ripoff and more, but Palworld has finally launched in early access, and, well, is it fair to say we're actually a little bit impressed? It's rare nowadays that we get everything we could possibly want from a game, and with it being in early access and having only just become readily available to the general public, we're sure there's going to be a lot wrong with the game to find, not least the ability to catch humans and treat them as pals. That seems a little extreme even for a monster collector that has thrived off its pocket monster comparisons and ran with it. And while Palworld certainly occasionally toes the line of legally distinct, there's a lot more to it than just Pokémon with guns. So with that in mind, if you're skeptical and are looking for a reason to dive into the early access action, here are a few ways that Palworld actually shakes up the formula that Pokémon has dominated for so long and potentially makes it better. You know, aside from all the guns, the survival genre, and shady factory business, obviously. Number 1, catching is everything. Pokemon famously ditched the gotta catch 'em all tagline a little while back when it became literally impossible to actually catch 'em all in one game, and even though we got a brief look at what a truly catch-mons first game would look like in Legends Arceus a while back, we went back to the norm with Scarlet and Violet. Palworld, on the other hand, very much comes from the school of Legends Arceus. The emphasis is on catching everything, and as many as you possibly can. The game actively rewards you for catching lots of the same pal again and again, giving massive XP boosts for catching 10 of a pal before eventually dropping off. Which leads very nicely into point number 2, each pal really does seem to be almost unique. Pokemon tries to make individuals from the same species unique with natures, stat spreads and more, but in Palworld, pals can hold a lot of different traits that make them useful, from boosting the power of attacks while in a fight, to being a much better worker around your base, to causing enemy pals to drop more items when you beat them. All this combines into a system that actively encourages you to catch as much as you possibly can to get the best things you need, rather than catching one, recording its existence and moving on. It's all about getting the right pal for the job, even if they're technically the same pal. Moving on, and now we're going to talk about the birds and the bee drills a little bit. Pokemon obviously brought in a breeding mechanic way back in Generation 2, so this has been around for a while, but Palworld's take on the system is a welcome change of pace from the usual put 2 compatible mons together and get one of the same mon, but a little bit different stats and maybe a different ability back. In Palworld, combining pals together leads to strange and unique combos that lead to entirely different species of pal being added to your team. You can also find eggs out in the wilds on your adventures just laying around, and sure, you might be stealing it from its parents, but we're sure you'll look after it properly. And it's a great way to bag rare pals early on without having to breed or search for them. It might not be as deep a system as it potentially seems to be at early glance, but for now, Palworld's take on the mechanic has us paying attention. Next on the list, we have the type chart. Okay, so this one is technically a little bit of a cheat, but Palworld has a type chart too, just like Pokemon does. And while it probably was tempting to simply borrow that system and run with it, they have at least made a few changes to keep it feeling fresh and giving us a whole new system to learn. Most of it stays on brand for the most part, sticking to the elements and their standard strengths and weaknesses, so fire is strong against grass and ice and weak against water, grass is strong against ground but weak to fire, water is strong against fire and weak to electric, you get the picture. Where things get a little more complicated is when you introduce dragon, dark and neutral, because dragon is strong against dark but weak against ice, and dark is strong against neutral but weak against dragon, and neutral is strong against, well, nothing and weak against dark. If all that hurt your head a bit, then yeah, me too. We've been knee deep in the Pokemon type chart for way too long, but we'll wrap our heads around it eventually. And finally, we have the base building, a crucial part of Palworld. Pokemon hasn't had secret bases for a long time, despite the community's best efforts to get them brought back in some capacity or another. Palworld, on the other hand, is all about the base building. It's probably a harsh comparison when Palworld is almost an Ark-level survival game. Is this one a bit of a cop-out? Maybe, but Pokemon tried base building once, and it was great, so fight me. In Palworld, your base and your pals are intrinsically linked, helping you to automate processes, make food, keep you and your pals safe and fed. It's a whole lot more than a glorified plush and trophy room. Just keep in mind that your cute monster game now has survival aspects thrown into it, and you're going to be fine. So there you go, just a few ways that Palworld takes what Pokemon helped build and potentially makes it better? I don't know, with the game in early access there's a lot to get through and discover, but what do you make of Palworld? Will you be giving it a go, or is it a flash in the pan? Let us know what you reckon down in the comments, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and while you're with us here at GG Recon, you should check out these videos here.